I'd like to introduce Brian Brookshire, who's going to give us some background on the forest products industry in Missouri and information on markets and challenges. Brian Brookshire has been the executive director of the Missouri Forest Products Association since 2005, and before coming to MFPA, he held several positions with the Missouri Department of Conservation over a 15-year period, including assistant resource forester, forest products marketing specialist, wood products specialist, silviculturist, and forestry staff supervisor. Missouri Forest Products Association is made up of companies and individuals involved in all facets of the forest industry, which contributes to over $10 billion annually to the Missouri economy. So Brian, you can begin when you're ready.
Okay, thank you, Brian. I really appreciate the opportunity to give a quick presentation today at the summit. It's a good opportunity for me to convey some good information about what's going on in the industry. And I thought I would just start with giving an overview of what the forest products industry in Missouri is like. We have 500 plus primary processors in Missouri. A primary processor is really identified by an operation that breaks down a round log. So a log would come into the facility and that processor would break down that round log. We have on any given year 600 plus loggers. We've had as many as 1,000 or 1,100 in Missouri, and you know, the numbers of loggers vary pretty significantly on an annual basis. We also have many secondary manufacturers in Missouri, and secondary manufacturers are those that take the products from a primary processor, say it's a board or a cant or something like that, and they further process it into another product. Brian mentioned in my introduction that it's a $10 billion industry in Missouri, so the forest products industry is obviously very big business. And really the reason that it is, and we are identified in the agricultural sector in the state of Missouri, and when you compare our industry to others, really the reason why we have the economic activity that we do is is largely a result of this secondary processing that we do, because those companies employ a lot of folks. We have 50,000 plus people directly employed by the industry in Missouri, and we have many more that are indirectly employed. So those secondary manufacturers really help the state of Missouri take advantage of this forest products industry. A good example of a secondary manufacturer are the companies that purchase, for example, green or not dried grade lumber from a sawmill. They take it, kiln dry it, and manufacture it into things like solid hardwood flooring. So MFPA, the Missouri Forest Products Association, we're actually this year celebrating our 50th year of being around. And the forest products, you know, MFPA, sort of our motto is that we represent you know, the forest products industry in Missouri, and we're their voice. And MFPA does a lot of work with legislative issues that may face our industry. We offer a lot of education programs. We distribute ample amounts of material out to our industry that can help their business and so forth. One of the programs that I really wanted to highlight, are actually two, is our professional timber harvester program and our master logger program. The professional timber harvester program and master logger for that matter are very successful partnerships with the Missouri Department of Conservation. These programs simply wouldn't happen without the MDC partnership. They help us both with implementing the program on the ground with actual presentations and participating in the education, and they help us financially to support these programs for the industry. The professional timber harvester program's been been around, we think, since about 1998. So we're over 2 decades into that program. Tremendous success with that program. We have trained literally hundreds of folks, and it's been responsible for saving lives for a long, long time. We certainly have trained the professional loggers in that program, but we've also trained a lot of private landowners, some that might be participating in the summit today, could certainly have gone through that program in the past. And we've anybody that's wanting to cut a tree safely, we offer the ability for them to go through and participate in the PTH program. One of the other exciting programs that we have in place now is our Master Logger program. Currently, the state of Missouri has 25 Master Loggers. These Master Loggers are a group of PTH trained loggers that have decided that they want to even elevate their status and professionalism in the logging profession, and they subject themselves to a lot of other criteria that's all completely voluntary. And this is a program that a logger could decide to do on their own. It's 100% voluntary, but they do subject themselves to third-party audits out on the ground. So we hire folks to go out and evaluate their logging jobs and provide that information back to us. And that Master Logger program is run by a committee that evaluates those folks over time, and it's very, very effective. And we currently have a list of folks that we're working with now to get into that program. So we hope that it continues to grow over time. And again, that's these programs are success stories of a partnership with the Department of Conservation. One of the issues I've been asked to address is markets. The markets for forest products in the state of Missouri have been on an enormous roller coaster for the past few years. So I kind of want to walk you through this process, and I think it'll create a little bit of an understanding of where we're at now with our different products that we make in our industry, and provide an understanding of how we've kind of been impacted by different issues, both domestically and internationally. So I'd like to start with China. It's interesting in that in 2017, in the middle of 2017, our forest products industry in Missouri was just looking outstanding. We were having a great year. We did have a great year in 17, and products were moving well. And I think it's important for us I want to talk a little bit about these different types of products that come out of our mills and where they find themselves in the marketplace. So typically in Missouri, when we're breaking down a round log, we make a number of products. Of course, it's species driven, but some of those products are called, is just lumber. This might be lumber that's an inch or inch and a half, 2 inches thick. Comes primarily off the outside of the log. That inch thick lumber is typically edged, so it's square edged, and it's various widths. And that green lumber, because it has not been kiln dried at that point, is typically stacked up and then sold into another market. That lumber has different grades associated with it, very simply from a standpoint of looking at the amount of solid wood that's in a particular board, the number of knots, holes, and what have you. And those boards are graded from sort of the best to the worst. The best board is called FAS. That's the boards that have very few knots in them, on down to the boards that might be a number 3 board, which has a lot of knots in them. So those higher quality boards in Missouri are the ones like what's called the number 1 common and FAS. Those are the boards that typically found themselves in a lot of times in an export market. So that lumber was the species of lumber that was could possibly going into a country like China. So, for example, in 2017, in the United States, looking specifically at red oak, there was $600 million of red oak shipped out of the United States just to China in 2017. And we go to 2018, that went down to about 480 million. And then in 2019, 280 million. So we had a 50% drop or more in the export value of red oak leaving the United States in about a year and a half. That was a direct result of the trade war that the United States entered with China. It turned our grade lumber industry, if you will, in the United States and certainly in Missouri, upside down in a very short period of time. So you can, and then the other markets, the other products that we typically produce out of a sawmill in Missouri is you have this grade lumber portion, and then we have a whole suite of what we call industrial products and byproducts. Industrial products are really the material that come out of the mill that goes into sectors like railroad ties. For example, a 7-inch by 9-inch by 8-foot 6-inch solid piece of hardwood lumber, which is sold as a railroad tie. And we have pallet products and slabs that go into the charcoal industry. And then of course we make chips and sawdust that are the byproducts that go into other various industries. Sawdust, for example, is used largely in the briquette charcoal industry. Chips are used in various fuel markets and in pulp and paper. So you have this whole suite of products that are sold out of a mill. So in 2017, that whole suite of products, the markets and the economy was really humming at that point. The markets for all these products were reasonably good. Of course, you had some sectors that were impacted and are a little different. But generally speaking, we were having a very nice year. Then we get into the China tariffs. Things become get upside down on the grade lumber market, and we start and then we go into the pandemic. So the markets for forest products in the state of Missouri over the past 18 months have been faced with enormous challenges. I realize completely. I've focused a lot on oak, and based on, you can see from Lance's presentation that such a large composition of our forests are made up of the red oak category. We have a lot of our industry is built on red oak, but we certainly have a thriving white oak industry with the presence of the stave industry in the state of Missouri, which is enormous. So I don't want to slight other species, but I just wanted to spend my time talking to you about how these markets, generally speaking, have been impacted. In 2020, what we're seeing right now when regarding China is that we're on pace. The first quarter of 2020 is just under $50 million in the U.S. that has been shipped to China. So 2020 is not looking all that great when you compare it to 2017 numbers, but those markets do tend to look like they're beginning to rebound. Industrial markets right now with railroad ties, thank goodness the railroad tie markets have remained relatively stable throughout this whole process with China and the pandemic, and that has been a real bright spot with our industry, along with white oak. The market for white oak for the different products that white oak goes into has been reasonably good as well. But the exports of white oak lumber to China also fell off dramatically by about 50% when the tariffs were put in place. So everything has been impacted, and it's been a real challenge for the industry. I will tell you anecdotally, and that's really the only information that I've got, you know, the industry in Missouri is certainly remaining intact, and our folks are certainly resilient. They're working hard to do what they can to adapt to the market conditions that they have. There's very, very few companies. Matter of fact, there's 3 that I know of in the state of Missouri that have actually went out of business over the past 2.5 years. And those companies, frankly, their closures were not necessarily a result of these direct market conditions that I've referenced. There were some other things going on. So thankfully, from a standpoint of the industry in Missouri, it does remain strong, it's robust, and it shows you the resilience of the industry in Missouri and the types of products that we make. They typically are able to capitalize on a particular product that's still decent in the market. I also wanted to talk about one of the issues that we're faced with in the United States is the fact that we have seen over the past certainly decade in the U.S., I'm talking about domestic markets now, for solid hardwood lumber, the domestic consumption of solid hardwoods in the United States has taken a drastic drop. That's the reason that we have become so dependent on China. Is China in 2015, 16, 17, and even earlier, of course, had really made up the slack, if you will, of the lack of markets in the United States for domestic hardwoods. And this is really pretty much across the board. This is white oak, red oak, ash, cherry, walnut. The preference and the use of those solid hardwood products domestically, primarily in people's homes, businesses, commercial buildings, has really waned over time. There's a number of reasons for that, we feel. Also, you know, we all know that there are changes in the markets. There's changes in preferences on the part of homeowners that really drive the marketplace. For example, in the late 80s, early 90s, if you bought a new home, it was likely to have very beautiful solid oak cabinets in it, with likely a solid hardwood floor. Today, the preference in a lot of cases has gone to painted cabinets or alternative flooring, such as concrete products, plastic products, every alternative imaginable. And the forest products industry has found itself behind the 8 ball when it comes to competing with those products. It's been a real eye-opening experience. So one of the things that as an industry that we have tried to launch in the past 6 months has been what's called the Real American Hardwood Promotion Coalition. This coalition is coming together with folks like me and my counterparts that represent associations both at the state and national level. And we've come together and pooled some money collectively to try to look at how we could launch a promotion campaign in the United States. This is 100% domestically driven, to look at how we can become competitive again. You know, how we can get in the retail stores with our products and how we can convince folks, builders, architects, homeowners to prefer our products again and tell our story. It's unfortunate that probably that we hadn't been able to do this before, but the China tariff And what happened to us with relying on that export market, I think really opened our eyes and said that we must get back into the domestic game again, because China became a really nice option for our folks to ship our material into, and perhaps it didn't encourage us, if you will, to keep up with the domestic markets. So what we started doing is looking at what's going on in these markets in the U.S., what all competitive products that are out there, and how we can begin getting active in that process. So it's been very interesting. Unfortunately, we launched this coalition effort just prior to the pandemic. So we met a couple of different times in different parts of the country as a group, began laying out what our efforts were going to be and how this process was going to work. And lo and behold, the pandemic hit, and we've obviously haven't been able to meet and work on this, but the effort is moving forward. One of the things that we were able to get accomplished, and the data is not completely in yet, is we've launched some focus group efforts where we've actually put some money into some research that helps us better understand the preferences of architects, designers, and homeowners. We've conducted this in Chicago, in Nashville, and again, it's new enough to where the data, if you will, or the information is not all yet available, but I can share with you that there has been some really interesting comments and information come out of these focus groups that sort of caught us off guard. One of which that's notable to me is that when we were collectively working at this coalition, one of our efforts that we wanted to really focus on was going to be the environmental benefits of using hardwood products or wood products in your home as opposed to non-renewable substitutes, such as laminates and all the different things that you find in homes now that are imported in, for example. And we felt like a really positive environmental message and focusing on that was going to help our cause in this whole effort. And to date, and I'm certainly not prepared to say that this is not going to change as we move forward, but the focus groups that we've visited with so far and the specific environmental messaging questions that we've asked simply have not resonated. And we found that, and what I'm saying there is that, we're asking questions about, would you use this product simply because it's renewable, it's the right thing to do, that type of messaging. And we found that those answers are no right now. I mean, it's pretty interesting what we're finding in terms of some from a homeowner perspective. Folks are very interested in being able to sort of change out, not everything, I say this a little bit in jest, but they want to be able to change or replace what they have in their home every 6 years. The mention of pet durability is incredible on putting something in that's not going to show pets in their home in terms of scratching and all this kind of thing. So there's a lot of interesting information we're trying to wade through there that we weren't necessarily expecting. So we've, in summary, in terms of markets for hardwoods, we have real challenges right now that I think we are prepared to face as manufacturing in the United States rebounds. So will the industrial forest products industry. And we're seeing that now. Manufacturing on a monthly basis, employment on a monthly basis is getting better and better. and we see the sales of things like pallets and industrial lumber also getting better and better every month. So we're looking forward to hopefully some better times ahead there. For example, our industrial products find themselves in the steel industry for blocking to stack hot steel on, pipeline skids, where when we're building pipeline, we rack up these skids to be able to weld up the pipe. All kinds of different uses that are out there that have slowed, if not completely halted, during this pandemic. So we're hoping that as things in the world sort themselves out, so will the forest products industry will be able to benefit from that. I did want to talk briefly about pine. I was asked to address potential markets for shortleaf pine. Shortleaf pine and the resource that we have in Missouri is certainly a resource that we would love to be able to take more advantage of and play a much stronger role in the management of that species. And we understand completely that shortleaf pine management would benefit extensively by better markets for that species coming out of the state of Missouri. I get questioned all the time regarding, because when you all go to Lowe's or Home Depot, Menards, somewhere at a box store and pay almost twice as much for a 2x4 as what you did even 6 or 8 months ago, it's like, why in the world don't we have a better market for pine products coming out of Missouri forests? It's a little bit of a complicated answer, but it comes down to the fact that, you know, we do have a nice pine resource here, but we don't have the pine resource that we can make building products out of, like 2x4s and 2x6s, 8s, 10s, and so forth. You know, a large mill in the state of Missouri might produce 10 or 12 million. A really large mill in Missouri might produce 20+ million board feet of lumber or products on an annual basis. That in a lot of cases for a pine mill in the South is something that happens in 2 to 4 weeks. So the production of pine building products is a completely different animal as compared to what we have in Missouri. So we really can't compete with that industry coming out of the South, even if we did have a large mill. Now there is the possibility of something like a mill that would produce, for example, radius edge decking that goes into the treating markets, some type of niche market that could take advantage of this really nice pine resource that we have in Missouri. That's something that various entrepreneurs have looked at over time in Missouri, and they continue to, and that will continue to be looked at. But there are, you know, some parameters in Missouri that just really make it difficult to ramp up a significant pine market. We do have the localized pine markets like we always have in Missouri with pine posts. And, you know, a lot of you were probably aware that there was a pine pole market in Missouri at one time down in Licking, and that's really not there anymore, but they still do make shavings for the pet and livestock industry, and they make it in large quantities there. So there are some isolated markets for pine, but I do not project anything particularly significant going on in that market, in my view, in at least the foreseeable future. We continue to hope for something to develop, but right now I'm just not aware of any. So I wanted to conclude with just a couple of thoughts on forest sustainability and forest health and it was really, I felt like it was good timing for Lance's presentation to be prior to mine, because he gave some really good information about, to me, I look at his data, and it's and it really it really provides an opportunity for good forest management in the future to ensure sustainability and health of our forests. And like one of the slides that he presented is that 180,000 acres of harvest in a given year, creating that disturbance that's needed for regeneration and deal with some of the mature forests that we have. And there's going to be the continued need for that. And in many cases, the ability to get the management accomplished in the state of Missouri for both public and private lands is obviously dependent on a healthy forest products industry, because the industry has the ability, thankfully, to go in and hopefully purchase those trees that need to come out in a management protocol and be able to provide some income to the landowner or to the government, and get the management accomplished. So our desire is always to try to work hand in glove with both public forestry folks and private foresters and landowners to provide that management on the landscape. And the harvesting is certainly a strong course of management that we advocate, and we want to be there for the future and work hand in glove with everybody to make sure this management gets accomplished. So Brian, that's my presentation.
Well, I appreciate that, Brian, and we do have a number of questions that we'll try to take care of a few of them. We should have enough time to get through them, I think. But in your opinion, do you believe the Chinese market will bounce back to pre-tariff levels, or do you think we have permanently damaged the Chinese timber market?
I do think that over the course of time, China and in Southeast Asia, for that matter, will rebound. Now, what I think that we will likely see is it's interesting when you look at the Asian markets. For example, Vietnam is becoming a much larger player in using our forest products in that part of the world, as is places like Malaysia, Cambodia, and other places there. And I do think as a whole, regionally, we will find ourselves at some point in the future back to where we were in years like 16 and 17.
And also relating to that, the China tariffs, has production in Missouri remained pretty steady, even though we haven't been shipping it to China? Have we still been harvesting and having the same level of production, or has production gone down?
Anecdotally, Brian, the only way I could answer that, because I just haven't seen the most recent data. Anecdotally, there's no doubt that that production is going to be down somewhat. During this time period of both the onset of tariffs and the pandemic and all the different things that are going on, the ability for mills to process material and so forth, of course, is market driven. And as the markets have come down, so has their ability to buy logs and process material. So it has gone. I'm fairly confident that we're going to see a dip, but that fortunately seems to, at least right now, be changing a bit, because and a lot of things are going to depend on just where this economy goes over the next 6 to 9 months.
And is the same thing true for lumber prices? Have they been fluctuating for what's being paid to landowners, or or what the mills are able to buy and pay?
I'm not near as up to date on, in terms of stumpage prices or the price paid to the landowner given a particular timber sale. But I can tell you certainly that lumber prices and the value of really a lot of our products, certainly not all of them, but red oak prices, for example, have dropped significantly over the past number of months. And I'm assuming that's translated in at least somewhat to the stumpage prices, but typically what we see is it's the price drop is not as significant on the stumpage side as it is on the lumber side.
All right, and as mentioned earlier by Director Pauly, and somebody asked the question, MDC enrolled its lands, much of its lands, into the Sustainable Forestry Initiative. And so do you envision any additional market opportunities, domestic or international, for Missouri Forest Products to market those sustainable SFI certified lumber?
A great question. And to be really honest with you, I just don't. I'm not saying anything negative whatsoever about the SFI program. I think it's a great program. It's something that's that has potential, but right now we are seeing we haven't seen any requests for SFI type material come out yet. I don't know, what to project in the future, but that's true for FSC also. We just, at least here in Missouri, we have not been able to capitalize at all on those programs to either get additional market share or additional money for our products. That just has not happened yet. And the request for that material going into these overseas markets, that does become important with some species, for example, possibly with walnut and white oak that go into Europe. But in terms of the products that we make here in Missouri that are by and large exported, we haven't had much request at all for those types of certified products.
All right, I'm going to probably just end with a couple more questions and we'll have to move on to our lunch break. But somebody did ask, what are the products being made in Southeast Asia from our hardwoods? What kind of products are being made and probably shipped back to us at some point?
Yeah, great question. Probably should have mentioned that. So it's interesting in that one of the, in my view, at least, one of the nice things that has happened, particularly in China over the years, is that, for example, 15 years ago, or maybe 20 years ago, when we really began in a significant way shipping lumber at that time, in particular to China, they were a manufacturing hub. Okay, so they received our kiln dried lumber. They would make something out of it at that time, primarily furniture and flooring, and they would ship it to somewhere else in the world, either back to the US or into Europe or whatever their markets were. It was a true manufacturing hub. Today, and the beauty of what we were taking advantage of until recent times, is that China was a true market. So their economy had grown to the point, and their government, even though there's a communist country, their government was allowing their middle class to grow substantially, and they loved Western hardwoods. So when you're in China and you're in restaurants, buildings, even homes, most of it is high-rise apartments. The folks that were sort of in that rising lower to middle class, if you will, they would be consuming our wood in their own home. So that became a true market. And so the lumber that we were shipping there was staying there. And during that time, countries like Vietnam and Cambodia started to be the manufacturing hubs, and China became the true market. So that's the reason we were able to ship so much material there. It wasn't always coming back here, and that trend kept on going until the tariffs hit.
All right, well, I want to end with one final question that really strikes home as to why the forest products industry is such an important partner in managing our state's forests. Because somebody does ask the question, how exactly does cutting and using wood for manufacturing help with conservation? And I know you have a forestry background and probably are well equipped to discuss the benefits of good forest management and how we can overall help conservation.
Sure. So the species, depending on for if this question's specific maybe to the conservation department or public forest, public agencies, when we look at data, for example, that Lance submitted to us, we have a aging forest that I think is even possibly more prevalent on public land. And in order to perpetuate this oak hickory forest that we have, we have a lot of wildlife dependency on, those forests require disturbance in order to perpetuate that into the future. And of course, those species by and large are shade intolerant. So it creates, so we have to have some sizable canopy gaps in order to regenerate and perpetuate that forest. And the forest products industry is the likely candidate in order to get that accomplished. And of course, the both public and private sector can benefit from that financially as well, get some income from doing that. But it's, that we're sort of in the disturbance business, and we're able to utilize those mature trees that are about to die, get those out of the forest, create those canopy gaps in order to perpetuate the next healthy and sustainable forest.
And from a wildlife perspective, I would just add, Director Pauly commented about bird populations declining, and one of the most critical habitat needs is that early successional forest. So when you talk about canopy gaps, you're really referring to opening up the forest, getting that regeneration in there and creating that early successional habitat. And of course, working with the forest products industry is an excellent way to get that done. Otherwise, you'd have to pay somebody to cut the trees down. But if you can sell the trees and create the habitat, then that's a win-win for the landowner and for wildlife.
That's correct.
Good reason to do that. With that, we do have a few more questions, but I believe we can type in some answers and get back to the individuals that asked them. So rest assured, we will get an answer to you regarding your questions. But in the interest of time and people getting hungry and leaving us for lunch, we're going to close out this morning's session.